Hi class, I'm here again and thank you so much for your patience. I hope that you were able to watch the previous pre-recorded discussion on Rizal's concept of a Filipino nation. As a recap, we talk about Morga's Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas, the indolence of the Filipino people, and Rizal's prediction of the Philippines within the century. So, at that previous module, you were exposed to the different writings of Rizal. For today, we will be talking about the other Rizal. No, I think this is something that most students are questioning, and for those who are some way are not so certain about Rizal's becoming of a hero and why he was even hailed as one of the very important persons to be talked about through a subject. That is why you are even mandated to enroll GE 1213. There are also historians, who also has doubts as to why it should be Rizal, and as to why, we have to give him that kind of honor, where in fact there are several Filipinos just like him in history that are worthy to be emulated, that are worthy to be hailed just like Rizal. And as to how we are going to deal with some of the prominent historians who will be telling us about their versions of a hero. Again, let me first present to you the specific learning outcomes. We are going to compare and contrast the different interpretations and approaches to the study of Rizal's life, works, and writings. So, titingnan natin how some historians were trying to weave their understanding of Rizal as a hero and try to point out some of their very important discussions as to why Rizal deserves to be called our national hero, and as to why it should not be him, and who should be worthy to be considered if not Rizal. And today we will be looking into some of the very important historians. We will be talking about Ambeth Ocampo, Recto's Rizal, and even Constantino's Rizal. Between Ocampo, Recto, and Constantino, there will be some varying understanding and interpretations as to who Rizal for them, and as to what are Rizal's contribution to Philippine history. And let us see if their versions of describing Rizal also fit your own interpretation as to who Rizal is for you. So let us look into the other side of Rizal for Ocampo, Recto, and Constantino. Okay, so Ocampo's Rizal. So, if you were not able to take a glimpse or was able to know Ambeth Ocampo, Ambeth Ocampo is an author of Rizal without the overcoat, Ambeth Ocampo was trying to tell us that if Rizal will just try to take away his coat, kasi nga, in most pictures, you can see that Rizal is wearing a coat, the same with what you can see now on your screen, and that if you will try to take that coat from Rizal, what kind of person you will see in Rizal. So, in the book of Rizal without the overcoat, Ambeth Ocampo was trying to compile different short essays, and these are notes that he used for presentation. With his trademark of humor and well-researched and hip visual aids, they have become well-received lectures from all over, edited each time and slowly polished even more into the essays in this book. Class, during my face-to-face classes before the pandemic, I used this book of Ambeth Ocampo to tell the students, and I will always assign them one essay of the book of Ambeth, and the students should present them in class. And some of the very outstanding essays of Ambeth that, if I could recall, that most of my students would share if these are being assigned to them, Ambeth was able to emphasize that indeed, without the overcoat, Rizal is really a simple man, He eat tuyo for breakfast, He eat bulad, as to how we are going to term it in our own language. and that Rizal is not really sobrasiliente. When we talk about sobrasiliente, in his card as to how we can associate it in today, hindi lahat excellent. There are also subjects wherein he just have a fair grade, especially on pathology. No, may mga subjects din na hindi siya outstanding, unlike how history would portray him as as an as an intelligent and excellent person. Also, Ambeth was so humorous when he told us that if you are going to measure the sleeve of Rizal, he also measured the circumference of Rizal's head by looking into his hat that he usually wore during his lifetime. He also was able to tell us even the height of Rizal, and that Rizal could be ang height niya is 4'11", if I'm not mistaken, or 5'1". But Ambeth was only making use of his height by measuring the sleeve of Rizal and trying to equate it with how the standard measurement of height of a person using that kind of sleeve. Now, sabi ni Ambeth, it's not because history would tell us na maliit talaga si Rizal, but during that time, Rizal's height is so normal for men in the 19th century. Kung ngayon, we can say that a 4'11" to 5'1" height is too short for a male. But during that time, it is so normal for men to have that height. Because again, we are not yet a mix of cultures. Wala pang mga Spanish, American blood into the Filipinos. And these are typical height of Filipino men and women in his lifetime. What else? Ambeth was also trying to tell us that just like us, if you are going to sum up his article, just like us, Rizal is an ordinary person. He is not a superhero, as what many would describe him, but his history, his experiences, and how he lived his life is just as normal as how we Filipinos are trying to survive in our day-to-day living. In short, Ambeth Ocampo gave us a humorous and normal side of Rizal, contrary to how many historians would try to depict him. What else? So this is a book that will tell you that Rizal, again, kind of funny looking with a small frame and a rather a large head, and he had a lot of girlfriends, and he even tried to explain it to us because for experimental purposes. It gives us a peek in his insecurities and his frustrations, down to the little stories of how he hated tipping because he was so kuripot when he was in Spain that he would only eat biscuits just to save for his day-to-day expenses, and that all of this happened when he was living abroad. And if you have time, class, you can look into these articles of Ambeth in online, or if you can, I think you can buy it in National Bookstore. And so it's a whole bunch of little stories that show you how Rizal again was just like us. So let us also proceed to Constantino's Rizal. In his book Veneration Without Understanding by Renato Constantino, Renato Constantino was trying to tell us that Rizal was not the leader of the revolution. In fact, he repudiated that revolution. In no certain terms, he placed himself against Bonifacio and those Filipinos who were fighting for the country's liberty. And I think Constantino was giving us a version that, is Rizal worthy to be called our national hero, or is it Bonifacio? Plus, I would like to tell you that Constantino was right, that in some ways, Rizal did not support the revolution. Even if you go back to the Noli and El Fili, Rizal was trying to tell us that an armed revolution is not a solution to the problem that the Philippines is facing, and that it's not that the kind of independence should only be received by peaceful means, by means of pen and not by sword. And so Constantino was right that if Rizal had the theory, it's only Bonifacio who put it into practice, and that it is Bonifacio who gave us that sense of understanding, that fighting and winning through war is the best alternative not to kick out the Spanish colonial powers in the Philippines. Yes, basically Constantino was right. And that Rizal's refusal to align himself with the revolutionary forces and his vehement condemnation of the mass movement and its leaders have placed Filipinos in a dilemma. Dilemma in such a way that Bonifacio was questioning whether or not the revolution was right or Rizal was right. If he was wrong or Rizal was wrong. And so, it creates that kind of divisionist mentality as to revolution would be successful or not, because Bonifacio was so passionate in reading some of Rizal's articles that he was able to believe that the writings of Rizal are real, but it can only be accomplished through revolutionary means. Either the revolution was wrong, yet we cannot disown it again, or Rizal was wrong, yet we cannot disown him either. So why am I telling this? Because does Rizal deserve to be our national hero when he in fact did not even pursued revolution, and it was Bonifacio who even made it successful? I will answer that as we analyze the learnings for today at the end of the discussion. So, hero worship therefore must be both historical and critical. We must always be conscious of the historical conditions and circumstances that made an individual a hero. And we must always be ready to admit at what point that hero's applicability ceases to be of the current value. So we have to accept that, yes, Rizal was able to write amazing writings, but this could not be made successful without Bonifacio's contribution in history. We must now determine the factors, economic and cultural, that made Rizal what he was. Because Rizal was born in a environment that taught him that the best way to go against Spain is through a peaceful means. He was even given that ample opportunity to see it when he was in Europe, and perhaps his experience and how he was able to cultivate that learning, that education gave him all the way to understand that revolution is not the answer, but the pen, knowledge, and contribution of the middle class and intelligent class and well-educated people in the community are so important to educate the Filipinos against what is happening in their country. So, let us proceed with Recto's Rizal. Now, Rizal and Bonifacio. So, if Ambeth was trying to hail Rizal as who he is, as an ordinary person, and Constantino was trying to tell us that it could have been Bonifacio and not Rizal because Bonifacio had won the revolution. So Recto was trying to balance it out all together by telling us that Rizal planted the seed of knowledge, the seed of intelligence, and it's the knowledge of telling us that, hey, this is something that is happening in the Philippines, that we have to be awakened and someone must help free the Filipinos against oppression. And so, if Rizal planted the seed, Bonifacio watered it. It was Bonifacio who had come to the picture with the ideas that would eventually lead its way to the revolution. And class, I think it would be best to answer all of this by looking into this very short clip.
Napakalaki ng kanyang kontribusyon sa pagmumulat ng mata ng mga Pilipino nung kanyang panahon. Marami siyang mga akdang ginawa, pero maliit pa lang siyang, bata pa lang siyang maliit noon. Talagang mahusay siyang manunulat eh. And then nung pagdating niya sa adult age, ang dami Mahusay siyang manunulat eh. And then nung pagdating niya sa adult age, ang dami niya ng mga sinulat na mga akda. Noli Me Tangere, El Filibusterismo. Yung kanyang mga panulat, ito yung nagsilbing tawagin nating eye-opener, no? Sa marami pang Pilipino na nagnanais makamit yung pagbabago sa lipunan. Siya yung nagtatag ng katipunan. Isa ito sa pinaka-importanting organisasyon na nagbigay daan sa pagkamit ng ating kalayaan. Napakahirap bago niya ito naitatag. Unang-una, bahagi siya kasi ng La Liga Filipina eh. Naniniwala rin siya sa simula na yung pagbabago sa Pilipinas ay maaaring makamit sa pamamagitan ng paghingi ng reforma mula sa mga dayuhang mananakop. Pero nung hinuli si Rizal, nakita niya futile, no, yung kanyang aksyon na ito, kaya siya ay nag-shift sa armed revolution. At ito na yung simula, nagtatag siya ng katipunan, pero ang maganda sa kanya, hindi niya kinuha kaagad yung pwesto ng pagiging Pangulo. Tinignan muna niya sa mga kasamahan niya, sino ba yung karapat-dapat. Yung mga tinatamasa nating mga freedom ngayon, mga karapatan, utang natin ito doon sa mga bayani natin noong unang panahon. Sina Rizal, sina Bonifacio, lahat sila nagbuwis ng kanilang buhay upang makamit natin kung ano man yung mga tinatamasa nating mga karapatan at mga kalayaan sa kasalukuyang panahon. Hindi natin sila dapat kakalimutan sa kanilang mga ganyang kontribusyon.
And so class, that short video clip, no, it's too short, but it tells us that we don't need to argue who should be hailed as a hero. But I think each of our forefathers, our heroes in history of the Filipino people, had contributed their share to where we are today. And if not because of them, no, their contributions to the becoming of the Philippines and independent Philippines would not be possible without each of their contribution. It might be Rizal, it might be Bonifacio, Antonio Luna, Malvar, and what are the other heroes you might consider in history. Again, each of them played a part as to the independence that we are having today. So, who is the other Rizal, no? If Constantino believed that it should not only be Rizal but also Bonifacio, if Ambeth was also portraying different roles of Rizal in the Philippines, and if Constantino was also trying to tell us that Bonifacio had his own contribution, and Recto telling us that it could either be both and both contributed in their own ways, I would like to present the other Rizal that is so important in the life of Rizal. And he is no other than his brother Paciano. It is the selfless brother, no, who aided Rizal while the latter was abroad in studying. Why we should consider Paciano? Because again, as I've told you class in the previous discussion, there would be no Rizal without Paciano. Paciano relayed to Rizal the story of the Gumborza. And when Rizal had heard the story of Gumborza, he was able to realize the different oppressions committed by the Spaniards. Without Paciano, Rizal would not be able to go to Europe and study the life and ways of the European nation and be able to apply it in the Philippines. In short, Paciano is the man behind the Rizal. And if there would be no Paciano, there would be no Rizal as we have known today. Paciano had helped in trying to build up the knowledge that Rizal was trying to impart in all his writings and was trying to imply in all his writings. And so Paciano is up there, way up there among the great minds of the revolution, because I would like to sum it all, class, by telling you that yes, it is worth it to discuss whether it's Rizal or Bonifacio, but before the Rizal, there is a Paciano. Paciano made Rizal who he is, and Rizal contributed to the identity of Bonifacio. All these men in the life of Rizal are worthy to be recognized in his lifetime as the other Rizal. And without the both of them, we would not see and recall the kind of history that we have now in books because of their contributions to his becoming. But whether we love or like or dislike Rizal, our question about the heroism of Rizal is always suspect. But not when the gentlest brother finally asked the most enraged and resentful question: Pepe, do you want to be the Filipino Christ? Class, if you go back to one of the writings and articles of Ambeth Ocampo, Rizal told us that he does not want to be hailed as an important person in history. He just wanted to be buried in Paang Bundok with only a cross on his tomb, only his name, his day of birth, and day of death. In short, Rizal was so certain not to consider him as one of the heroes of the Filipino nation. Rizal does not want to be recognized as how the books was trying to hail him, but he just wanted to be an ordinary person with who wanted to share his contribution to the Filipino nation. So what is now the relevance to history with all the discussions that we had today? The becoming of a hero is not only because of his sole contribution to the Filipino nation, and that there are a lot of people beside Rizal who made him who he is today. It is no longer an issue whether it is Rizal should be hailed our national hero or should it be Bonifacio. But the issue that we have to tackle at this point of the discussion is that the becoming of a hero that we have today would not be made possible without the people who was with him. Either it Paciano, Bonifacio, Luna, Mabini, and all other persons in history who made a huge impact or independence today, we have to understand that it is a work of marvelous contributions of many Filipinos who contributed to our common share of Philippine history. Rizal might be our persona, the prime focus of GE 1213, but he would not do it alone unless the help of the people who contributed to where we are today. In short, the other Rizals are the Filipinos who made history worth to be studied in our lifetime. With that, class, I hope you will understand that even as we struggle towards our own version of oppressions that we have today, corruptions, the pandemic, and all other things that we are experiencing today, we cannot do it alone. The government cannot do it alone. The government cannot be solely blamed for everything that is happening in our country. In this discussion, we all learn that we have our own share as Filipino nations. We have our own share to help our government and do what we think is beneficial to our society. Let us not ask what our country can do for us, but what we can do for our country. Our share is to identify our potentials and see in what our own little way can we help solve the pressing issues of our community. Just like the pandemic, instead of calling out the government for its efficiency, why not do our share through social distancing, by wearing masks, by wearing face shield? That way, we can help fight COVID-19 and all the spread of the virus. Class, again, history has taught us that collaboration of these people had contributed to the well-being of a nation. May you remember that you have a role to play in nation building. Thank you so much for listening today. Again, so who is the other Rizal? If there would be no Bonifacio, there would be no Paciano, then there will be no Rizal. Remember, if you have any question, you may just post it in our inquiry and concern section in our GE 1213 online classroom homepage, or reserve it during our next synchronous class. Thank you so much for joining and listening to this pre-recorded discussion. Stay safe and always do hand washing whenever you go out or go back inside your own houses. And again, remember, you have a role to play in nation building. Have a good one today, and I'll see you again in our next session. Goodbye, class.